The day the letter was burned, Amara felt something inside her break, yet a strange spark ignited. Her stepmother, stern and unforgiving, had snatched the fragile paper from Amara's trembling hands. The letter, yellowed with age and stained with tears, was all she had left of her mother, the only link to the woman who had vanished without explanation years before. Her stepmother's eyes burned with cold rage as she tossed the letter into the fire, watching the flames consume each carefully written word. Amara's heart shattered with every crackle, a silent scream trapped in her throat. The room filled with the acrid smell of burning paper, and Amara sank to her knees, staring in disbelief as the letter turned to ash. But as the last ember flickered out, something unusual happened. The ashes settled on the floor and faint patterns began to shimmer in the dust. At first, Amara thought it was her imagination, mere shapes formed by the wind. Yet the symbols were distinct, delicate curves and lines that seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't explain. Only she could see them clearly, and they filled her with a mix of fear and wonder. Days passed, and Amara found herself drawn back to the ashes again and again. Each time, the symbols shifted, revealing new signs and hidden meanings. They spoke of a legacy buried deep within her bloodline, a destiny woven by forces older than the village itself. Though her stepmother intended to erase her past, these ashes whispered a different story, one of power, hope, and a future only Amara could claim. At night, the symbols glowed faintly in her dreams, guiding her toward forgotten truths. She began to notice signs in the world around her, a strange pattern in the bark of a tree, an arrangement of stones near the river, even the shape of clouds. Each echoed the shapes in the ashes, confirming that the letter's message was not lost but transformed. The stepmother's cruelty had not destroyed the legacy, it had merely hidden it beneath layers of ash and silence. Amara's life became a delicate balance between hiding her secret and seeking answers. Her stepmother's shadow loomed large, her harsh words and punishments threatening to crush any spark of hope. But the ash's secret language gave Amara strength, a quiet rebellion blossoming inside her soul. She knew that whatever lay in those charred fragments was the key to understanding her mother's fate, and her own. Slowly, Amara began to map the symbols, drawing them in a notebook she kept hidden beneath her bed. She learned to read their meaning, discovering clues about her mother's past and the destiny that awaited her. The ashes spoke of an ancient bloodline tied to the earth and sky, to forgotten powers that could either heal or destroy. They hinted at a hidden path, one that would lead Amara away from her stepmother's control and toward a future she could choose. Yet fear lingered. The stepmother's anger was unpredictable and fierce. She watched Amara with suspicion, sensing something she could not understand but deeply feared. The girl's quiet defiance in her eyes was a silent threat, a reminder that the past could not be buried so easily. The village, too, whispered behind closed doors, some dismissing Amara as a strange child, others sensing the stirrings of something ancient and powerful. In moments of solitude, Amara let the weight of the ashes settle around her like a cloak. She felt their warmth and coldness, the paradox of destruction birthing new life. The letter's burning had not been the end but a beginning, a transformation that no fire could undo. Within those ashes lay the promise of change, a chance to rewrite the story her stepmother tried so hard to erase. Amara's eyes reflected the flickering light of a new dawn, the secret symbols etched in her heart. The ashes, once thought to be mere remnants of loss, had become a silent vow, that her mother's legacy would not fade. It whispered of power waiting to awaken, of a destiny that could no longer be denied. The girl who had lost everything now held the key to everything yet to come. And so, beneath the weight of a cruel stepmother's hatred and the watchful eyes of a fearful village, Amara clung to hope, a fragile, burning ember glowing quietly in the ashes of her past. Amara's discovery of the ashes' strange patterns had ignited a fire inside her that refused to die out. Each morning, she would return to the small pile left from the burned letter, watching as faint shapes shimmered and shifted in the dust. The symbols seemed to move like whispers, communicating secrets only she could understand. They were more than just marks on the ground, they were a language, an ancient script encoded with meaning, a key to unlocking her mother's hidden story. At first, the stepmother dismissed Amara's fascination with the ashes as childish fantasy. "It's just dirt and burnt paper," she sneered. But Amara knew better. She saw the symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight, traced their curves in her mind, and felt a strange warmth spreading through her veins every time she looked. These were not ordinary ashes. They were a message, a legacy encrypted in fire and loss, waiting for her to decode. Determined to understand, Amara began collecting scraps of burnt paper from the remains of the letter, carefully preserving every crumb. She carried a small notebook hidden beneath her ragged shawl and started to sketch the symbols exactly as she saw them. The lines intertwined like vines, looping and curling into shapes that resembled ancient glyphs she had once glimpsed in the village elders' worn books. Her fingers trembled as she copied each mark, tracing patterns that seemed to pulse with life. Her stepmother's cruelty grew harsher as she sensed Amara slipping away into a world she couldn't control. "Stop wasting time with your foolish dreams," she barked one evening, slamming the door shut behind her. But Amara's resolve only deepened. The stepmother's words, meant to break her spirit, only fueled her need to uncover the truth. Every harsh glance and bitter insult became a shadow she fled from into the comforting glow of the ashes. One night, under a pale crescent moon, the symbols in the ashes rearranged themselves into something unmistakably clear: words. The letters shimmered faintly, spelling out a name: Naera. Amara's breath caught in her throat. That was her mother's name, whispered only in the rare moments of tenderness before she vanished. The realization struck her with the force of a thunderclap. The ashes were guiding her, revealing clues left behind by her mother herself. Driven by this revelation, Amara began asking questions around the village, carefully navigating the wary eyes and tight lips of neighbors who had long turned their backs on her family. Some whispered that Naera was a woman touched by magic, feared for her mysterious gifts and untimely disappearance. Others spoke of an old feud between Naera and the stepmother's family, a bitter rivalry that had fueled years of cruelty and suspicion. The village seemed to hide 1,000 secrets beneath its peaceful surface, and Amara's ashes-lit map was her only guide. Days turned into weeks as Amara followed the trails hinted at by the ashes. The patterns led her to forgotten places: a hidden grove deep in the forest where wildflowers bloomed in strange colors, an ancient stone circle etched with symbols that mirrored those in the ashes, a narrow path by the riverbank where whispers seemed to linger in the wind. Each step brought fragments of a story, her mother's story, that had been buried beneath layers of lies and silence. At the stone circle, Amara felt the weight of her lineage settle upon her shoulders. She traced the carvings with gentle fingers, recognizing the same symbols that glowed in the ashes. Here was proof that Naera was part of a powerful tradition, one rooted in the earth and sky, connected to forces long forgotten by the villagers. The realization filled Amara with awe and a growing sense of purpose. She was not alone. Her mother's spirit lived on in these signs, urging her to continue. The stepmother's rage escalated as Amara's defiance grew more apparent. One evening, after the girl returned from her explorations, the stepmother confronted her in the dim light of their small home. "You are wasting your life chasing shadows," she spat, grabbing the notebook from Amara's trembling hands and tearing pages free. "Your mother was a curse and so are you." But the ashes had already written their destiny in Amara's heart. The stepmother's words were nothing but desperate noise. With each tear shed in secret, the ashes glowed brighter, illuminating pathways only Amara could follow. The letters and symbols began to form sentences, weaving a narrative of courage, loss, and hidden power. Naera had been a guardian of sacred knowledge, a keeper of ancient rites that could protect the village from darkness. But her stepmother's ancestors had betrayed her, silencing her voice and burning her letters in an attempt to erase her legacy forever. Amara's journey was no longer just about understanding her mother's past. It became a mission to reclaim what had been stolen, to restore honor to her name and awaken the power hidden within the ashes. With every symbol decoded and every secret uncovered, Amara's fear gave way to determination. She realized that her stepmother's cruelty was a reflection of her own fear of losing control over the destiny that was slipping through her fingers. As Amara pieced together the fragments of her mother's story, she found unexpected allies. An old woman who once knew Naera offered whispered wisdom and ancient remedies. A group of children, curious and unafraid, gathered to hear Amara's tales, their laughter a balm to her lonely heart. Even the animals seemed to sense the change, watching over her with quiet vigilance as she walked the forest paths. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amara sat by the river where her mother had once stood. She scattered some of the ashes into the flowing water, watching as the symbols dissolved and shimmered beneath the surface. In that moment she felt a surge of connection, to her mother, to the river spirit, and to the destiny that awaited her. The ashes were no longer remnants of loss, they were the foundation of a new beginning. The stepmother's attempts to crush Amara's spirit had failed. The ashes had not only survived the fire but had transformed into a beacon, a map guiding the girl toward her true self and the power she was born to wield. As the village slumbered in ignorance and fear, Amara embraced the secrets hidden in the ashes, ready to write a new chapter in the story her mother had begun. A story of hope, strength, and destiny that could no longer be silenced. The stepmother's hatred toward Amara had grown from bitter resentment to something darker, something almost venomous. She saw the girl not only as a threat to her own authority within the household but as a danger to the carefully constructed world she controlled. Every whispered word about Amara's mother, every flicker of hope in the girl's eyes, challenged the stepmother's hold on power. Desperation led her to seek ancient and forbidden magic, a curse she could cast to bind Amara's spirit and silence the legacy that threatened to rise again. The curse was not spoken aloud. Instead, it was woven silently into the household, into the shadows that clung to the walls, the coldness that settled in the girl's room, and the unyielding weight that pressed down on her chest each morning she awoke. The stepmother's spells were insidious, designed to isolate Amara from the world, to make her doubt her own mind and the truths she had begun to uncover. Whispers of dread crept in at night, filling the girl's dreams with shadows and silence. Amara could feel the darkness closing in. It was a chill that settled deep in her bones, a voice that whispered fear and despair. She found herself shrinking away from the few friends who dared to show kindness, afraid her cursed fate might touch them too. The village, already wary of her strange sensitivity and the mysteries of her mother, turned even colder. The stepmother's curse worked not only on the girl's spirit but on the very atmosphere around her, bending reality to keep her captive. But Amara was not one to surrender easily. Beneath the suffocating veil of the curse, her heart burned with defiance. She knew that the ashes from the burned letter still held power, a power she could call upon if she could only find the strength to resist the darkness creeping into her soul. Each time the stepmother's curse tried to silence her, the symbols hidden in those ashes flared with light, reminding her of a destiny far greater than the pain she endured. The stepmother, sensing her magic faltering, grew crueler. She forbade Amara from leaving the house, chained her to loneliness with scornful words, and filled the girl's days with endless chores meant to wear her down. "You are nothing but a shadow," she hissed, "and shadows disappear." But Amara clung to the faint hope that one day she would break free, that the curse could be undone by the truth hidden in the ashes. Isolation became a prison, but it was within that prison that Amara found moments of unexpected clarity. She spent long hours tracing the symbols in her notebook, whispering the names and phrases the ashes revealed. Slowly she began to understand the nature of the curse. It was not just meant to silence her, it was meant to sever her connection to the river spirit, the ancient power her mother had once served. Without that connection, Amara would become lost, a mere echo of her true self. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon and the stepmother slept, Amara dared to sneak outside. The night air was cool and filled with the scent of earth and water. She hurried to the riverbank, clutching the ashes tightly in her hands. Kneeling by the water, she whispered a prayer she had pieced together from the symbols, calling out to the spirit she had only begun to understand. The river responded. A gentle current stirred, shimmering with a faint silver light. Amara felt warmth spread through her fingers and into her heart, as if the river itself was reaching out to protect her from the darkness. In that moment she knew she was not alone. The curse might try to bind her, but the ancient power within her would never be extinguished. Despite this fleeting moment of hope, the stepmother's curse continued to tighten its grip. Strange nightmares plagued Amara's sleep, visions of drowning in endless darkness, of voices silencing her cries, of shadows swallowing the river's light. Each morning she woke trembling, the weight of the curse pressing down like a stone on her chest. But even in her fear, Amara refused to give in. One day the stepmother confronted her with a cruel smile, holding a small vial filled with dark liquid. "Drink this," she commanded. "It will break your ties to that foolish magic and make you forget those ashes and your mother's lies." Amara stared at the vial, heart pounding. She could feel the power behind the curse in that liquid, the twisted intent to erase her very identity. With trembling hands, Amara shook her head. "I will never forget," she whispered, voice stronger than she felt. "And I will never stop fighting." Fury flared in the stepmother's eyes, but before she could force the vial to Amara's lips, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room. The flames in the hearth flickered and danced, casting strange shadows that seemed to whisper warnings. It was as if the river spirit itself had intervened, protecting Amara from the dark magic. From that day forward, the stepmother's attempts to control Amara became desperate and reckless. Yet, with each curse thrown, each cruel word spoken, Amara grew stronger, not in body but in spirit. She realized that the true power was not in avoiding fear or pain but in standing firm against them. The curse could isolate her, but it could never extinguish the light born from her mother's ashes. Amara's journey was only beginning. The stepmother's curse was a dark cloud overhead, but the symbols in the ashes were a beacon guiding her forward. With courage forged in suffering and hope rising from despair, the girl vowed to break the curse, reclaim her heritage, and write a destiny that neither the stepmother nor anyone else could escape. In the days following the latest confrontation with her stepmother, Amara's world felt smaller and darker than ever. The weight of the curse pressed down on her like an unyielding stone, and the loneliness she endured seemed endless. Yet even in her darkest moments, the faint glow of the ashes in her hands reminded her that she was not completely without hope. It was this fragile hope that drew a mysterious figure into her life, a stranger whose arrival would change everything. The village healer, an old woman known to many but truly understood by few, had long observed the undercurrents of pain and magic stirring beneath the surface of their quiet settlement. Her name was Nana Yawa, a keeper of ancient knowledge and secrets passed down through generations. Rumors whispered that she had once communed with the spirits of the river itself, and that her eyes could see beyond what ordinary people perceived. When she heard about the girl whose stepmother had burned the letter and the strange patterns in the ashes, Nana Yawa's heart stirred with recognition. One evening, as Amara sat alone near the riverbank, clutching the ashes and tracing their symbols with trembling fingers, she sensed a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw Nana Yawa standing just beyond the flicker of moonlight filtering through the trees. The old woman's gaze was steady, her expression both kind and knowing. "I have watched you, child," Nana Yawa said softly, her voice like a gentle breeze rustling through dry leaves. "You carry a burden not your own, and a power that is waiting to be awakened." Amara's eyes widened. She had long felt isolated, misunderstood by the villagers and even by her own family. Yet here was someone who spoke of her strength, not her weakness. "Why are you here?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To help you," Nana Yawa replied. "To guide you in understanding what the ashes reveal, and to teach you how to protect yourself from the darkness that seeks to claim you." Over the next days, Nana Yawa became a secret mentor. She taught Amara to read the symbols hidden in the ashes, ancient runes and glyphs that told stories of protection, resilience, and awakening. These markings were part of a forgotten language, one tied deeply to the river spirit that had watched over the land for centuries. Through quiet lessons beneath the canopy of trees and beside the flowing river, Amara learned to channel the subtle energy coursing through her veins. Nana Yawa explained that her mother had once been a guardian of this sacred power, tasked with maintaining balance between the human world and the spirit realm. The stepmother's curse sought to sever this bond, but the ashes held the key to reclaiming it. "You are not alone," Nana Yawa assured her one evening, placing a weathered hand over Amara's. "The river's spirit flows through you just as it flowed through your mother. It is a gift but also a responsibility. You must learn to wield it wisely." Amara struggled at first. The power was elusive, like trying to hold water in her hands. But with Nana Yawa's patient guidance, she began to feel a connection, a gentle pulse beneath her skin, a warmth rising from her heart whenever she focused on the symbols. Each small success fueled her determination to resist the stepmother's dark magic. Nana Yawa also taught her simple protective charms and rituals, ways to shield her spirit from harm. They crafted talismans from river stones and herbs, whispering blessings that mingled with the wind. These secret defenses became Amara's armor, helping her face each day with a bit more courage. Despite the stepmother's ever-watchful presence, Amara found solace in these stolen moments of learning and growth. Nana Yawa's wisdom gave her strength not only to survive but to hope for a future where she could break free from the curse and claim her true destiny. One night, as they sat by the river's edge, Nana Yawa spoke of a time long past, when the village had flourished under the protection of powerful guardians. "Your mother was one of those guardians," she said quietly. "She held the delicate balance, keeping the river's spirit alive in the hearts of the people. But darkness came and with it, fear. Your stepmother's ancestors sought to suppress this power for their own gain." Amara listened, her mind racing. The burning of the letter was not just an act of cruelty, it was part of a deeper, ancient struggle that had shaped her family's fate for generations. Now she understood that the symbols in the ashes were more than a map, they were a call to reclaim what had been lost. With newfound resolve, Amara thanked Nana Yawa and promised to keep their lessons secret. She knew the path ahead would be dangerous and lonely, but she was no longer afraid to walk it. The power within her was awakening, and with it, the hope that she might one day break the curse and rewrite the story her stepmother tried so desperately to erase. From that night on, the girl's strength grew quietly but surely. She practiced her newfound skills in secret, drawing courage from the river's steady flow and the wisdom of her hidden mentor. The ashes no longer symbolized only loss. They had become a source of power, a living connection to the legacy her mother had left behind. And as the village continued its harsh watch, unaware of the quiet rebellion growing beneath their feet, Amara prepared to face whatever darkness lay ahead, armed with ancient magic, unyielding hope, and the guidance of a mentor who believed in her destiny. Amara felt the weight of the ashes in her hands, their faint glow pulsing with a rhythm only she could sense. Each day, more symbols emerged within the swirling gray dust, enigmatic signs that whispered secrets of a power she was only beginning to understand. These were not just remnants of a burnt letter, but fragments of her mother's spirit, guiding her on a path that few dared to tread. Yet, the path was perilous, shadowed by her stepmother's relentless pursuit and the dark forces she wielded to keep Amara under control. The first vision came on a night thick with mist, as Amara sat near the river's edge, clutching the ashes tightly. In her mind's eye, a door appeared, ornate, ancient, inscribed with the same mysterious symbols that danced in the ashes. The vision beckoned her to find this door, promising that beyond it lay the first key to unlocking her true strength. The message was clear. To claim her legacy, she must face trials designed to test her courage, wisdom, and heart. But the stepmother, sensing a shift, doubled her efforts to trap Amara. Whispers of curses and threats followed the girl like a storm cloud. Men from the village, loyal to the stepmother, prowled the woods and alleys, hunting for the girl who dared defy their queen's will. Every step Amara took felt like walking on thin ice, each shadow a potential enemy. Yet, the ashes' guidance was unwavering and Amara's resolve grew stronger. The first trial led Amara deep into the ancient forest that bordered the village, a place long avoided by most, believed to be cursed or haunted. Here, the trees whispered in a language forgotten by time, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and magic. The vision had shown her a tree marked by a spiral of runes glowing faintly under the moonlight. Finding it was no simple task. The forest seemed to shift and close around her, as if testing her determination. When she finally reached the tree, Amara found a hollow at its base, where a small, intricately carved box lay hidden beneath a bed of moss. Inside, she discovered an amulet pulsating with a warm, golden light. As she lifted it, a surge of energy coursed through her, awakening dormant senses. The amulet was a fragment of her mother's power, a talisman meant to protect and amplify her own magic. But retrieving it was only the beginning. The second trial came swiftly. A cryptic riddle echoed in her mind, urging her to seek the mirror of truth, buried beneath the ruins of an old temple forgotten by the village. This mirror, the ashes suggested, could reveal the true nature of her heritage and unlock hidden abilities. The temple was a place of shadows and silence, filled with traps and illusions designed to deter the unworthy. Navigating the temple's dangers required all of Amara's growing skills. She faced physical challenges, narrow ledges, crumbling floors and sudden drops, and mental ones, where illusions tried to deceive her into turning back or doubting herself. The stepmother's minions lurked nearby, adding pressure and fear to her journey. Yet, with each step, Amara felt the ashes' power guiding her, helping her see through the lies and fears clouding her mind. At the heart of the temple, the mirror of truth awaited. When Amara looked into its shimmering surface, she saw not only her reflection but visions of her mother, strong, wise, and radiant. The mirror showed her the path she must walk, a journey not just of power, but of healing and reclaiming what had been stolen from her. The reflection whispered that her tears, her courage, and her heart were the true sources of her strength. But with the awakening of her powers came a greater danger. The stepmother, furious and desperate, unleashed her darkest magic to capture Amara once and for all. Shadows twisted into snarling beasts that prowled the village outskirts, hunting the girl who dared to challenge their mistress. Amara had to learn quickly to defend herself, not just with newfound power but with wits and agility. During a narrow escape through the forest, the ashes revealed a hidden sanctuary, a cave veiled by enchanted vines and glowing with a soft blue light. Inside, Amara found ancient scrolls and herbs, relics left by her mother and the guardians before her. Here, she honed her magic in secret, practicing spells to shield herself and to call upon the river spirit's protection. Each day of training brought her closer to mastering the legacy the ashes had revealed. The trials were not just tests of strength but of heart and mind. Amara confronted visions of doubt, loneliness, and fear, shadows cast by her stepmother's curse and the harshness of the world around her. But with every challenge overcome, her spirit grew brighter, her resolve firmer. She learned that power was not just about magic, but about knowing one's own worth and embracing both pain and hope. The ashes, once symbols of loss and destruction, had become her guide, illuminating a path through darkness to light. And though the stepmother's forces continued to hunt her, Amara was no longer a frightened girl. She was a warrior of spirit, destined to rewrite the story written in burning ash and reclaim a destiny no one could escape. As the final trial approached, Amara stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the river, the very river her mother had once called sacred. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the voices of the past and the promise of what was yet to come. She knew the greatest challenge lay ahead, but with the ashes light burning within her, Amara was ready to face whatever destiny awaited. The ashes in Amara's hands seemed to shimmer more intensely than ever before, as if alive with a secret yet to be fully revealed. Over days and nights, the cryptic symbols and patterns coalesced into words, ancient script written in a language older than the village itself. It was a prophecy, one that foretold a great upheaval, a turning of tides long anticipated but feared by many. The prophecy spoke of a girl born of fire and tears, whose legacy was intertwined with the earth and the river that ran beside the village. It told of a time when shadows of cruelty and tyranny would be broken by the light of a new dawn, heralded by one who bore the mark of the past but carried the hope of the future. This girl, Amara, was destined not only to rise in power but to shatter the chains that bound the village under the iron fist of her stepmother. As Amara deciphered the words, a mix of awe and dread settled in her heart. This was not merely her story but the story of the entire village, hidden for centuries beneath layers of tradition, fear, and silence. The prophecy's language hinted at forgotten truths, that the village's founders had once made a pact with the river spirit, a pact broken by greed and betrayal, which had cursed their land ever since. The rise of the stepmother's harsh rule was a symptom of this broken promise, and the girl's destiny was to restore balance. Armed with this knowledge, Amara felt a surge of purpose, but also understood the enormity of the challenge ahead. The stepmother's reign was not simply a personal vendetta but part of a larger cycle of power and control entrenched in the village's very foundations. To fulfill the prophecy meant dismantling not just a cruel woman's grip but centuries of fear and oppression. The village elders, who had long clung to the old ways and dismissed the girl's heritage as dangerous nonsense, were suddenly confronted with undeniable evidence of the prophecy's truth. Whispered conversations turned to fearful debates. Some elders, rigid and proud, insisted that the prophecy was a threat to their authority and sought to destroy any trace of it. Others, quietly shaken, wondered if the time had finally come for change. Amara, aware of the rising tensions, moved carefully. She began seeking out the few who might be sympathetic to her cause, those who had suffered under the stepmother's cruelty or doubted the village's rigid traditions. Together they formed a fragile alliance, bound by hope and the shared desire to see the prophecy fulfilled. But trust was scarce and betrayal lurked at every turn. The stepmother, sensing the growing unrest and the girl's newfound power, intensified her efforts to suppress the prophecy. She unleashed fear and violence to silence those who listened to Amara, spreading rumors that the girl was a witch and the prophecy a curse. The village became a battleground of belief and control, with each side fighting not only for survival but for the soul of their community. Amara's nights were restless, haunted by visions sent by the ashes, images of the past intertwined with glimpses of the future. She saw the founders of the village, proud and wise, making a sacred vow by the river's edge, promising protection and balance. Then she saw how greed and betrayal shattered that vow, leading to darkness and despair. But through it all, the girl's spirit shone like a beacon, a promise that the cycle could be broken. The prophecy spoke of a final reckoning, a moment when the river itself would rise to judge the village, cleansing it of corruption and fear. Amara knew this moment was drawing near, but she also understood it could not come without sacrifice. To face the stepmother and the forces aligned against her, she would need to embrace not just her power but the full weight of her destiny. As word of the prophecy spread, the village's ancient beliefs began to crumble. Temples once held sacred were defiled by doubt, and old customs were questioned openly. The people, torn between fear and hope, found themselves at a crossroads. Would they cling to the harsh traditions that had bound them for generations, or would they step into a new era shaped by the girl's courage and the river's forgiveness? In the quiet moments between chaos, Amara held the ashes close, feeling the pulse of the prophecy within them. They were more than just remnants of a burned letter. They were a living testament to the power of truth and the inevitability of change. With each passing day she grew stronger, her resolve steeled by the knowledge that her fate was no longer hers alone. It was the fate of an entire people, waiting to be reborn. The lost prophecy was not just a warning or a promise. It was a call to awaken, to rise, and to reclaim what had been stolen by fear and cruelty. And in the heart of that call, Amara stood ready, the ashes glowing bright, a symbol of a destiny that neither her stepmother nor anyone else could escape. The tension hung thick in the air as Amara stood at the threshold of her stepmother's crumbling abode, the weight of the ashes burning softly in her palm. This was no longer just a personal reckoning. It was a battle for the soul of the village, a clash between the oppressive darkness the stepmother embodied and the fragile but growing light Amara carried within her. Every step forward was heavy with the memories of pain, betrayal, and stolen truths, but also with an unyielding hope born from the mysterious power the ashes had granted her. The stepmother awaited inside, seated like a queen on a throne of decay, her eyes narrowing with cruel recognition. "So, you think these ashes make you strong?" she sneered, voice thick with scorn. "You are nothing but a child, clinging to ghosts and lies." Her words were sharp, designed to cut, to wound, but Amara stood firm. She knew the stepmother's power was rooted in fear and control, a power that had thrived in silence and submission for too long. As the confrontation escalated, the air around them seemed to thicken with a palpable energy. The stepmother summoned shadows that writhed and twisted like living serpents, attempts to suffocate Amara's rising light. But Amara, drawing on the strength bestowed by the ashes, the remnants of her mother's love and legacy, called forth a radiance that shattered the darkness. The glowing symbols that had appeared in the ashes now shimmered along her skin like ancient tattoos, pulsating with power and purpose. The battle was more than physical. It was a war of wills and spirits. The stepmother hurled curses and threats, trying to break Amara's resolve with visions of despair, loneliness, rejection, and failure. Yet with each assault, Amara recalled the lessons of the hidden mentor, the trials of the ashes, and the prophecy's promise. Her heart, once fragile and broken, beat with a newfound strength. She was not alone. She was the vessel of a destiny centuries in the making. The room shook with the intensity of their clash, dust falling from the rafters like silent witnesses to the final reckoning. Flames flickered in the hearth, but it was the fire within Amara that grew brighter, feeding on the truth the stepmother tried desperately to deny. "You cannot erase what I am," Amara declared, voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "Your cruelty cannot extinguish the light of those who came before me." In a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Amara raised her hand, letting the ashes drift into the air like a shimmering storm. The symbols swirled, weaving a protective barrier around her, cutting through the stepmother's dark magic. The power of the ancestors, the river spirit, and her mother's love converged, wrapping her in a cocoon of invincibility. The stepmother, sensing her grip slipping, unleashed one final desperate attack, a wave of despair so intense it threatened to consume the very walls. But Amara, fueled by the legacy of the ashes and the courage of her own heart, met it head-on. With a cry that was part defiance and part hope, she shattered the darkness, sending a wave of light cascading through the room. As the dust settled, the stepmother lay weakened and broken, her once imposing figure diminished. Amara stood tall, no longer the frightened girl of yesterday but a beacon of strength and renewal. The village outside, once shrouded in fear and silence, seemed to hold its breath, sensing the dawn of a new era. The ashes, now fading to gentle embers, had fulfilled their purpose. They had written a destiny not just for Amara, but for all who would come after her, a destiny of resilience, truth, and transformation. In that moment, the old evil was vanquished and new hope blossomed, promising a future where the shadows of the past could no longer hold sway. With a final glance at her stepmother, Amara whispered, "This is only the beginning." The battle had been won, but the journey toward healing and renewal was just unfolding. Yet she was ready, stronger, wiser, and unbreakable, ready to lead her people into the light. The morning after the fierce confrontation, a quiet calm settled over the village, as if the earth itself was exhaling after a long-held breath. The stepmother's reign of cruelty had ended, and the shadows that had once gripped the hearts of the villagers began to lift. But amidst the ruins of old fear and pain, something new was stirring, an ember of hope sparked by the ashes that still glowed softly in Amara's hands. The ashes, once a symbol of destruction and loss, now carried a new meaning. They were reborn, not as remnants of what was burned away, but as the seeds of renewal. Amara felt their warmth pulse through her, connecting her to the legacy of her mother and the strength she had uncovered within herself. The mysterious symbols that had guided her through trials now shimmered like a living map on her skin, a testament to transformation. Word spread quickly through the village of the stepmother's fall and the girl's emergence as something more than just a victim. Curiosity replaced suspicion. Fear gave way to cautious hope. People gathered at the riverbank, where the ashes had first whispered their secrets, seeking the light that Amara now embodied. They saw not just a girl but a leader, a bridge between the old ways and the promise of change. Amara's heart was heavy with the knowledge of what had been lost, but it was also buoyed by the possibilities ahead. She understood that healing would not be swift or easy. The scars left by years of oppression ran deep. But she also knew that the ashes held the power to mend what was broken. With each sunrise, the village began to awaken, not just physically but spiritually. She began to share her story not as a tale of suffering, but as a journey of resilience and rebirth. Children listened wide-eyed as she spoke of the hidden messages in the ashes and the strength found in embracing one's true self. Elders who had once turned away from her now approached with reverence, seeking guidance on how to rebuild trust and unity. Amara worked tirelessly to restore balance to the village's fractured spirit. She called gatherings where voices long silenced were heard again, where old wounds were acknowledged and forgiven. She encouraged the villagers to see beyond tradition's harsh edges and to honor the strength and vulnerability in truth. The river, once feared and distant, became a sacred place of reflection and renewal. The ashes scattered along its banks nourished the soil, inspiring new growth and life. Gardens flourished where despair had taken root, and the village's once dry fields yielded abundant harvests. It was as if the very earth responded to Amara's healing touch, joining in the rebirth. But Amara's greatest victory was not just in changing the village's fate, but in transforming her own. No longer bound by the pain of loss or the weight of others' cruelty, she embraced her destiny fully. The ashes were no longer remnants of destruction. They were the foundation of her strength, a symbol of the power to rise from even the darkest ashes. As she stood at the river's edge one evening, the sun casting a golden glow over the water, Amara felt the presence of her mother's spirit gently guiding her. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. With the ashes reborn as a beacon of hope, she was ready to lead her people into a future defined not by fear or pain, but by healing, justice, and the promise of new beginnings. The dawn that followed the stepmother's defeat was not just a day of victory, it was the beginning of the village's reckoning. For generations, the people had lived under the weight of harsh traditions, their lives shaped by fear, silence, and a rigid sense of order enforced by the stepmother's iron will. Now, those foundations were shaking, and the village could no longer hide from the truths buried beneath years of cruelty and secrecy. As the first light spilled over the rooftops, whispers began to stir among the villagers. Old tales told in hushed tones were now spoken openly, revealing the scars left by the stepmother's reign, broken families, silenced voices, and dreams crushed beneath her relentless control. The ashes, once dismissed as mere remnants of destruction, were now recognized as a powerful symbol of what had been lost, and what could be reclaimed. At the heart of this reckoning was Amara. No longer the frightened girl of the past, she stood tall as a living testament to resilience and change. The villagers looked to her not just as a leader but as a mirror reflecting their own need for transformation. Her journey from victim to champion challenged the very fabric of their beliefs, forcing them to question long-held customs that had justified oppression and silence. In the village square, a gathering was called, a council unlike any before. Elders, once unquestioned in their authority, listened as Amara spoke with a voice both gentle and firm. She spoke of healing, of embracing the pain that had been hidden for too long, and of building a future where justice and compassion could thrive. Her words stirred a mixture of hope and fear. Change was daunting, but it was also necessary. Some villagers clung desperately to the old ways, fearful that abandoning tradition meant losing their identity. Yet even they could not ignore the shifting tides. The stepmother's cruelty had left deep wounds, and the denial that had sustained their customs was crumbling under the weight of truth. One by one, voices joined Amara's call for renewal, echoing through the village like the first warm breath of spring after a harsh winter. The ashes played a central role in this transformation. Scattered across the village, they became a reminder of the past's pain and the promise of rebirth. Children traced the mysterious symbols with curious fingers, and elders meditated on their meaning, finding wisdom in their intricate patterns. The village's connection to its history deepened, not as a chain to bind them, but as roots from which they could grow stronger. As days turned into weeks, tangible changes began to take shape. Communal rituals once steeped in fear were replaced with ceremonies of gratitude and remembrance. Walls that had divided families came down, replaced by open spaces for dialogue and celebration. The river that flowed beside the village, once a symbol of dread, became a place of gathering and renewal, its waters reflecting the new spirit of the people. Amara's role as a leader was embraced with growing respect. She guided the village with humility and strength, balancing tradition with innovation. Her connection to the ashes, and through them to her mother's legacy, was a source of inspiration, reminding everyone that even the darkest moments could give rise to light. Yet, the reckoning was not without struggle. Doubts lingered, and old wounds reopened as the villagers confronted the depth of their pain and the mistakes of the past. Forgiveness was a fragile thread, often tested by fear and uncertainty. But with each challenge, the community's resolve deepened, woven tighter by shared experience and a collective desire for healing. In the quiet moments, Amara reflected on how far they had come, and how far they still needed to go. The path ahead was uncertain, marked by both promise and peril. But for the first time, the village faced its future with open hearts, ready to write a new chapter defined by courage, justice, and compassion. The reckoning was more than an event, it was a rebirth. The ashes that had once symbolized destruction had become the foundation of renewal. The village, forever changed, had learned that true strength was not in denying pain or clinging to cruelty, but in facing the past honestly and choosing a better way forward. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the village, Amara stood beside the riverbank, watching children play freely and elders share stories once silenced. In that moment she knew their journey was far from over, but the reckoning had begun, and with it the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The story of Amara, the girl whose stepmother burned the only letter from her mother, only to have its ashes write a destiny they couldn't escape, grew beyond the bounds of her village, weaving itself into the fabric of countless lives and hearts. What had begun as a tale of sorrow and cruelty transformed into a powerful legend of resilience, hope, and the enduring strength of truth. The ashes that once threatened to destroy her became the very symbol of her unbreakable spirit and the legacy she left for generations to come. As years passed, the village blossomed anew, guided by the lessons Amara had imparted. The letter's secrets, once hidden in fragile fragments of ash, had revealed a lineage of magic, courage, and wisdom that connected her to something far greater than herself. This connection was no longer a mystery or a curse. It was a beacon, a guiding flame lighting the way for those who felt lost or oppressed. The villagers, young and old, came to understand that the past could not be erased, but must be embraced as the foundation for growth. The ashes, carefully preserved by Amara and her closest allies, became sacred relics. They were kept in a crystal vessel at the heart of the village, surrounded by carvings and murals depicting the trials and triumphs that had defined their collective journey. Pilgrims traveled from distant lands to witness this powerful symbol and to learn from the legacy it represented. The story of the girl who had risen from the ashes, literally and figuratively, inspired not only her village but countless others who struggled against injustice and despair. Songs and poems were composed in her honor, each recounting the burning of the letter, the cruel stepmother's tyranny, and the miraculous discovery hidden within the ashes. These works were shared around fires, in schools, and during festivals, ensuring that her courage was never forgotten. Children grew up knowing that tears and trials could forge strength, and that even the darkest moments held the seeds of transformation. The elders, who had once doubted and feared change, became storytellers and teachers. They embraced their role as keepers of history and wisdom, passing down the truths that Amara had uncovered. Their voices carried a new tone, one of humility and openness, as they recounted the village's reckoning and the promise of renewal. Through their efforts, the village's old prejudices faded, replaced by a culture of empathy, justice, and shared responsibility. Amara herself became a figure of reverence, though she remained humble and grounded. She devoted her life to nurturing the community, mentoring the young, and guarding the fragile balance between honoring tradition and embracing progress. Her connection to the ashes, the tangible link to her mother's legacy, remained a source of strength and guidance. Whenever challenges arose, she would touch the crystal vessel and remember the journey that had shaped her destiny. The letter's truth, once thought lost forever, lived on, not only in the ashes but in the hearts and actions of those who had learned from it. It spoke of love, sacrifice, and the unyielding power of hope. It was a reminder that no force, no matter how cruel or oppressive, could snuff out the fire that burns within the human spirit. Beyond the village, the legend of Amara spread through neighboring lands. It became a tale told by travelers and traders, a story that transcended borders and cultures. In distant towns and cities, people found solace and inspiration in her journey, applying its lessons to their own struggles. Her name was spoken with reverence, a symbol of the triumph of light over darkness. The legacy written in fire also sparked a renaissance of belief in the forgotten magic that once flowed through the land. Scholars and mystics sought the ashes and the story behind them, hoping to understand the deeper mysteries of destiny and power. This renewed interest led to discoveries that enriched the spiritual and cultural life of the region, fostering a sense of unity and purpose. Despite all the change, the village never forgot the painful sacrifices that had paved the way for their rebirth. Monuments were erected not to glorify conflict but to honor endurance and healing. The stone inscribed with the words, "She wept and the gods listened," stood proudly beside the riverbank, a place where people came to reflect, to remember and to draw strength. Each year, on the anniversary of the day the stepmother's fire transformed the girl's fate, the village held a festival of flames. Lanterns were released into the night sky, symbolizing the ashes' journey from destruction to destiny. Songs filled the air and stories of courage echoed through the streets, binding the community together in a shared celebration of resilience. For Amara, the festival was a deeply personal moment, a time to honor her mother's memory, to acknowledge the pain endured, and to rejoice in the life forged from those ashes. She understood that her story was not just about survival but about the transformative power of embracing one's true self, no matter the obstacles. As the lanterns drifted upwards, their soft glow blending with the stars, Amara felt the presence of those who had come before her, the mothers, daughters and ancestors whose strength flowed through her veins. The letter, though burned, had spoken a truth that could never be silenced. Its ashes had written a destiny that no one could escape, a destiny that belonged to all who dared to hope and to fight for a better world. And so, the legacy lived on, carried by every heart touched by her story, whispered on the wind, and immortalized in the eternal dance of fire and ash.